And baby, you could be my Nancy Drew, but it ain't no mystery that I fancy you. And I could be the Shaggy to your Scooby-Doo. Me and you together, baby, we can't lose. And baby, you could be my Nancy Drew, but it ain't no mystery that I fancy you. And I could be the Shaggy to your Scooby-Doo. Me and you together, baby, we can't lose. My Nancy Drew.
Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the NDW Podcast. I'm your host, Hugh Miller, and I'm once again joined by my wonderful co-hosts, Eli and Victoria. Welcome back, guys. Great to have you here.
It's good to be back. It's been too long.
It has, hasn't it?
A long time.
Yeah, well, I think the last episode we recorded was in July with the one and only little jackalope, Kalina Herman, and so that was an absolute joy, and I'm actually kind of shaking right now with excitement because of how amazing this episode's going to be. And I think I can speak for my co-host when I say that we are incredibly excited and incredibly honored to introduce our next special guest to the show, Mr. Kevin Manthei. Welcome, Kevin. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. This is exciting for me as well.
That's so awesome. It's such a... I remember when I was a kid, I sort of first discovered who you were when I was listening to the soundtrack to the Haunted Carousel, just on repeat, because it was just the credits. It was only one song, and I saw your name come up, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool! I'm gonna go check this guy out." And I must have been 11 or 12 at the time. I was so excited. I sent you an email, and you actually replied, and it was like just the greatest day of my life. And
oh, that's cool to hear.
Yeah, this was like years ago, probably 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was such an awesome thing. And so, and now we're actually speaking in person, or more or less in person.
Yeah.
But yeah. So before we start the show, I just got a couple things I need to mention. So first off, this show is not affiliated with or endorsed by Her Interactive. And second, even though this episode will focus on mostly the music of the first 25 or so Nancy Drew games, there may be some spoilers that pop up just naturally. And finally, we're going to have a bit of interactiveness to the show, where we'll listen to and talk about some of our favorite music tracks from the game. So I'll play them, and then we'll all listen, and we'll just have a good chat. It's going to be great. It's going to be really great. So, without further ado, Kevin, would like to ask you to take us back to kind of your roots with music, how you got started, what made you realize that you wanted to be a musician, and just sort of how you got to where you are.
It all started with jealousy. I was jealous that my sister wanted to take piano lessons. So I was like, I need to take piano lessons too. I want to check that out. Because before I ever really knew it, we had a piano at our house, and I would just like to sit at the piano not knowing what I was doing whatsoever. But I remember very distinctly playing low and loud and high and soft on the piano keyboard and creating emotions with whatever I was doing on the piano. And that quickly, once I started piano lessons, that quickly turned into starting to understand music and writing my own music on the piano, which then morphed into buying lots of synthesizers in my high school years. And then starting to have those ideas of like, well, could I make a living doing this, doing something with music? I just loved writing music and creating emotions. I knew about film scores, and I didn't, wasn't quite sure if that's what I wanted to do, but I knew that I needed to go to music school. So I grew up in Minnesota, ended up at the University of Minnesota, auditioning and getting into the music school there and studying theory and composition. And during those 4 years, I really started to get a real clear focus of what I wanted to do, which was to write music for film and television. So that led me to finding out about a really awesome degree, a 1-year graduate certificate program at University of Southern California, USC, for scoring for motion pictures and television. And I applied, came out, met with this amazing guy, Buddy Baker, who was heading up the school, and this guy wrote music and hung out with Walt Disney. He was a staff composer with Walt Disney during the heyday of Disney. Yeah, and he wrote music for like The Fox and the Hound, and music for a lot of different cool places in Disneyland. And I got accepted into that program, and I got married right after college, moved out to Southern California, lived right by USC, like pretty much right after the Rodney King riots, and kind of had a little bit of a culture shock moving to California, and just jumped into USC like gangbusters, and met some amazing fellow composers like Marco Beltrami and Christoph Beck, and who I actually both worked for both of those guys right out of school. And it's just amazing to see like the talented composers that I went to school with that are all doing so well. And anyway, so that then led, into wanting to do this for a living, obviously. And what was interesting though is like, how did I get into games? Well, so I had this degree in writing music for film and television. And at the time, they didn't really talk about video games much, but there was in the late 90s, there was, a lot of video games that were coming out now on the CD-ROM instead of, the bleeps and the bloops and the awesome Nintendo kind of cartridge vibe. And it was like, they called it Red Book audio, which just meant that it's CD quality audio. And you could put this on the disc, and the CD-ROM disc would be spinning inside of the computer, and it would stream just like it would a CD. It would stream the audio directly into people's speakers. So because of that, you could have a full symphonic sound, or you could have whatever the composer deemed appropriate, record that, and that could be streamed off. A lot of times it was in mono. Maybe not 44.1K, which is CD quality. Maybe it's like half of that, like 22. But it still sounded pretty darn awesome. And so I jumped into games almost by a fluke. And the very first video game I scored was The Indian in the Cupboard, which was for the Paramount movie. It was a children's movie at the time. And man, I just fell in love with video games after scoring that game. And I would say maybe only about a year and a half after that was when I was just kind of doing my networking and marketing and getting the word out. Like, this is literally pre-internet. It's just crazy to think about this, but like I was marketing myself just by figuring out, by using gaming magazines and going to events and just figuring out, who's making what. And I got in on the very beginning of Her Interactive, and I did a bid, and I remember doing a bid package for Her Interactive. I don't think I had to write any music, but I probably submitted a demo, like just kind of my general music and whatnot, and submitted a bid for like how much I would charge for the music. And I think I remember too, I think I got a letter in the mail that said, we accepted your bid and we want you to do it. It wasn't even an email. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it was a letter, because I remember like opening it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got the game. I can't believe it. It was so crazy. And so this was like 1998, maybe.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, about 1998. I know where I was living, and my daughter was born not in that apartment, but she was born, and then she lived in that apartment for a couple of weeks or a couple of months before we moved to our first house. And she was born in June of 1999, and I know it was before then. So yeah, isn't that crazy? Like, so
that's incredible.
Here we are, 2021, and the span of I wrote music for 25 of the games, the first 25, and which went up to about 2012-ish.
Yeah, about that. Yeah,
maybe number 25.
That's
incredible. Your long answer for how I got into music, but I brought it all the way into Her Interactive and the amazing series of Nancy Drew.
That's amazing. That's a fantastic intro there. Holy cow! Like I'm kind of like speechless after hearing that. I don't even know where to go from there.
Yeah, any questions based on that?
Yeah, so did Her Interactive and you have to negotiate for each game, or did they do them in like chunks, or did they just like you so much that it was kind of like an unspoken deal that you two had to just keep composing as long as they had something for you to do?
It's so interesting, and it was one of the things that was kind of a towards the end of the process was like a bane in my like a thing that I wanted to change and try to tweak as we were going along. But what happened was the very first game, I'm pretty sure there was about 10 pieces of music, and it was about 10 minutes of music approximately. And for whatever reason, that just became the template literally for the next 25, or the total of the 25. Now, I don't know why, but something about the 10 really gave them a lot of 10 pieces in about a minute each, really gave them what they needed. And so that was something I always was like trying to talk to Megan Geiser and Robert Riedel about, was like, can we, why are we always at a minute? Why are we looping minute long? Let's go. Why don't we do a minute and a half? Why don't we do 2 minutes? Let's get some, like, because game technology kept changing,
Right.
But then also their engine was like stuck in mono for so long.
Right.
I don't even know how long. I just kind of gave up asking about it. And so I would have to deliver in mono. I was like, oh my gosh, my beautiful stereo mixes are being folded down, into mono. And so the limitations of their streaming and their engine were there. And the engine and stuff did get better along the years. And I think you guys would know better. I'm sure they switched to stereo at some point. But yeah, so but as far as budget was concerned, I think that was interesting too. Like that first, I might have got some small bumps along the way, but I think like it was almost like that first game just created the template, and then they just kind of took that and ran with it for almost 10 plus years. It was really, really amazing.
Obviously you composed for so long. So when you were given a brief for a new game or a creative, I don't know what they were actually called, the sound instructions.
Yeah, music creative brief. I like that.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So when you were given that, were they telling you sort of ahead of time, we're gonna keep doing games, or we keep wanting to bring you back? Like, was there ever any worry of possibly being replaced?
Oh, that's a good question. Not really. No, I think they just really, and we did a contract per game. So
okay.
It was just like, I know Megan and Robert really liked me, and we were just in a really great groove. And it was just, we were on like autopilot. I don't know. I felt like almost autopilot at some point. It was just a really amazing job for me, because every game was different.
Right.
But it still had that mystery element. I kind of knew what was coming, but it was always exciting and challenging. They gave me, I think what happened a little bit into a few of them, I requested a little bit extra money for live musicians. And that's why there's so much live musicians on it, is because they were very respectful that, if you want to have live musicians, that costs money. It's not just like, and I like to be very protective of my creative fee versus, like, if you're going to pay me a creative fee. Don't expect me to take my creative fee and, spend it all on production. That's
right.
I don't think that's cool. So they were really great about that. So because of that, we were, and just because of my desire to really want each one to be really special, we were able to populate with a lot of live musicians.
How did the process go when Her Interactive would like come to you and say, okay, this is our next game? Yeah. How much information were you given about like the setting, the story, any sort of specific sound or theme that they were looking for? Did they give you a lot of information, or were you given a lot of creativity in that?
Both. So composers, I would say when you're a composer for a video game, more information is better than less information, because you're not sitting there living with the game like the creators are. and you're just coming in cold. So the more they can tell you about what they want, where they want music, the kind of the style, and maybe if they have any examples or ideas, the better, I feel. And Her Interactive, and it was mostly Robert Riedel that I worked with. And then I worked with a couple other producers later on. I could, if you told me some of their names, I'd be like, yes or no.
Probably Rob or Nick or...
What's Rob's last name?
Rob Hay, I think. Robert Hay or... oh gosh, maybe Jared Neuenhaus, but probably not.
Well, Jared was did marketing. I never.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
So, anyways, I would just get the most amazing documents from them, and it was really. It started with Robert, created them. Actually, I started working directly with Megan Geyser first.
Right.
And he would kind of create the documents, I think, in the beginning, and then as the company got bigger, then Robert came on. And then Robert did most of them. So he and Megan really created the template of how they wanted to work with the composer, and just kind of how it was all set up. So I would get really like maybe a 2-3 page document, and it would outline each 10 pieces, kind of what they're looking for, some examples, some ideas, and probably pre-YouTube. So it would just kind of reference certain sounds or songs or artists or whatever. And they may even have sent me some audio examples. So it really depended though on the title too. Sometimes it'd be like they really exactly knew what they wanted and they even had specific examples. Other times they were giving me the adjectives and the ideas, but not, like make it sound like this, Right. It was always very respectful towards me as the composer and the creative side of it, to be able to put my input and my stamp on it. But also it's really, I always find it great when I can be inspired by music that's out there, as long as someone's not saying we want it to sound exactly like this, but they're just saying we like this, this is a great piece and we can see this kind of thing working. So, I mean, kudos to Her Interactive for their documents. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why the music has always been really successful in the games is because a lot of thought has been put into what do we need and what do we want and what's the sound going to be for this particular title.
Totally. Well, seriously, that is one of the key aspects of every single game, is the music. And like that shapes everything. If you got the wrong track, even just if it's off just a little bit, then it ruins the mood of everything. And so, I totally agree. And I really appreciate how much work went on behind the scenes on your end, on Her Interactive's end, and how everything just meshed into this incredible creation, Was there, you did about 25 games. Was there any moments or any songs or games that were tougher to compose than others, or where you sort of lacked a little bit of inspiration?
Some of the ones that were challenging was the one that was more the 1940s.
Oh yeah, Secret of the Old Clock.
That's my favorite soundtrack that you did.
I'm
my
just
favorite game.
Yeah, I love how it turned out. Like it was, we had some really great live musicians and it turned out really well. But, I would say if someone said to me, what's the style of music you fear writing the most? I'd say probably like big band bebop or something.
Wow.
Something like that. I'm not really, I can fake jazz, but there's certain kinds of jazz that are harder to fake than others. So, but that turned out really well. And I distinctly remember just having so much fun on the recording session for that one.
I was going to ask about the Secret of the Old Clock because it's just such a distinct soundtrack compared to a lot of the other games. Right. So I'm glad you brought that up because I was very curious about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one too, we were able to go very period with it, versus it just really went to those specific decades. Whereas a lot of times what I try to do when I write music is not to just make a piece of music that sounds like a certain period of time, but I like to take let's say it's was it what's the one that had sort of Japanese elements? Was that Alibi?
That was Shout Out the Water's Edge.
Right. Yeah. Like for that one for example, it's like, well, let's take some Japanese instruments, but let's put them into a sort of a noir, dark, ambient, spooky, mysterious kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's fun to me, is like taking those elements, but then twisting them. So it's like, you're like, oh, okay, it sounds, like from the 1920s, or it sounds like Japanese elements, but it's in this cinematic universe that fits the game. But I think, I think the Secret of the Old Clock, I think we were able to, on some of those, we were able to go very just period, like almost like source music that was, almost like music you would hear coming out of an old radio.
Yeah, I agree. That's amazing. I think that soundtrack is incredible. And Ian, V, if you guys want to comment on that, because especially V, I know that you're a big fan of that one. But yeah, it fit the game, and it just sounded effortless,
I think for like Shout Out the Water's Edge, I've noticed that a lot of the tracks are very ambient, like you said, which when you like listen to the tracks like on their own, you can notice that a lot more. But when playing the game, it really just adds to like the depth of the atmosphere and story that you're playing, which I think makes it really effective.
Yeah. Like, I appreciate that. I think that to me brings up the aspect of like, how in the world do you not make a listener hate the music when you're only getting 1 minute of music and it loops over and over for an indiscriminate amount of time? And that's always in the back of my mind. So let me talk about when I'm writing game music. I'll tell you my philosophies, which is when you write game music, you can't write like you're writing a pop song where you maybe have an A section, a B section, then you go back to your A section, then you go back to your B, and then maybe you go to a C, and then you go to your A and your B. Like, that's cool if you're doing a 3-minute song and someone then goes and listens to something else. But what happens when that song repeats, and then it repeats for 20 or 30 minutes? So I have to give the developer and the listener as much new material as possible. So I wouldn't say with all of the music, but I would say in general, if you ever listen to my music, listen to that 1 minute and see how long it goes before you hear anything that repeats, or if it repeats, it's going to be really, really different the second time, because I have to give you, the listener, a full minute of fresh material, so that when it repeats, it's almost like the repeat is, the B section. Or the repeat is, the repeat is when like a pop song would just go back to the chorus again. So that's how I did a bigger bang for the buck, so to speak, so that like you're playing a game. I don't know how long you guys play like one of these games. Like, you're listening to 10 minutes of music over and over. That's it.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. It's got to
have a lot of mileage in it,
Yeah, well, I think for any, wannabe composers that are listening to this podcast, like, that is some seriously valuable information. And, that really is important to think about, because I've listened to these music tracks hundreds of times. Like, it's actually ridiculous. And I listen to them at work, on the way to work, back home from work, my spare time.
You know them better than I do. I haven't listened for a long time.
Well, we're gonna revisit some tracks today as well. So hopefully that'll jog the memory.
I actually have a question. I don't think it was in the questions we had before, but so in like the first 10-ish games, all of the games took place in America. So, as you're writing music for them, there wasn't too much opportunity for like, world music. There were a couple scattered in there, like the Chinese theme song from Message in a Haunted Mansion, and you brought in a little bagpipes in Deception Island. But how is it to kind of branch out and be able to do more world music once they went to Europe and Asia and all those other places?
I mean, I really like that. It's really fun to take the world and ethnic elements and use them in the games. But I would say the first 10 games, even though they were maybe not world specific, I feel like it still was really challenging on different levels because, for example, you've got the carousel one, which was really challenging to do that kind of music, but also twist it and make it go into those kind of ways. And a lot of it was cinematic, like the Ghost Dogs Moon Lake is very cinematic, and the Secret of the Shadow Ranch has sort of that Western vibe, which is really fun. And just a lot of them too was like just really focusing on getting a sound for the overall games and the sort of the mystery sound and the right touch of ambient versus music, versus like motion. How much motion do these pieces have, and how much do we sit back and just give some really good ambience? Again, it goes back to like, what percentage are we giving to the overall vibe here? Like if I'm constantly, turning it up to 11 and the visuals are at 11, people are going to be like, their heads are going to explode. It's all gotta really be this cohesive thing that works. And so those were the things that we were really focusing on and challenged on. And I think Treasure in the Royal Tower had like I'm seeing harpsichord and there was some, I felt like very challenged. Really, every single game felt like a challenge.
Were there any particular tracks that you wanted to revisit really quickly, just to get a refresher, or
any like personal favorites that you can remember?
Well, not really, but I just have a really special. The Secrets Can Kill, the very first game, just of course feels very special to me, and I can really still remember like writing the original theme for that. And I actually had this is kind of interesting. Film composer Marco Beltrami, his wife sang on the main Secrets theme.
No way.
Yeah, but they didn't like the vocal. Like they didn't want vocals on it. So I think the one that's in the game doesn't have a female vocal.
No, it doesn't. No.
Yeah. So I was like, I remember being disappointed with that because I was like, it's so cool,
So does that mean that did you write, this might be a silly question. Yeah. Did you write the lyrics for what became known as like the Nancy Drew rap that was originally in Secrets Can Kill? Because that's a banger and I sing it all the time.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I forgot about that. So that's my friend, Fernando Tabayan, and he's a lawyer in Minnesota. I think he lives in Wisconsin. And we went to college together and we were just really good friends. And he's an amazing singer. And I mean, when I was just doing my cheesy 4-track synthesizer music, I would write songs and then I'd have him sing them. And anyways, fast forward a little bit, I was, finally getting some stuff. But the other thing is we both really loved like Public Enemy and rap. And I was like, this, I can't even remember how it came up, but it was like, we can do this rap thing. And I said, hey, do you want to do it? He's like, yeah. So he came up with all the lyrics and he rapped it over at, actually remember that Indian in the Cupboard?
Right.
So the company that I did that with, there was a guy named Adam. He had a little studio in Minnesota. So I had Fernando go over to his place and they just recorded it there. And then they sent me, they probably just sent me the final mix. He probably just did the mix there. Sent me the WAV file, and again, literally, he sent it like in the mail probably as a DAT tape, via FedEx. That was how I was delivering files. I would record everything onto a DAT tape, digital audio tape. It's these cute little like mini cassettes,
right?
Like super high quality CD quality audio. And I remember when I was really busy writing games in the very beginning, I'd always be like, okay, I got to get it done by FedEx, and sometimes I'd have to like drive down to the main FedEx facility and got my FedEx envelope and run in just before, it had to go off for the day and get those, 3 or 4 tracks in so that they could listen to them and approve it or whatever. It's just so funny. It's like we take so much for granted now. I just
Yeah.
Forget about all this stuff.
Wow, that was amazing. I've always, because I was under the impression, and this is probably just completely, well, it's totally ridiculous now, but I had read a while ago that the actual writer of those lyrics was a friend of the composer or something, or sorry, the CEO of Her Interactive at the time.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Is the rap on with? I can't remember where was the rap on the first episode, on the first Stay Tuned for Danger.
So it was
Sequence can kill.
Well, it's not actually in the game; it's in the game's files.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, really?
It is. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was stuck in the files, but it was never actually in the final game.
Oh my gosh! No way.
Yeah. When was the last time you heard it?
Oh, you can play it. If you can
Play it for us, Hugh.
All right, let me actually.
That'll help me know if I'm pretty sure Fernando did the lyrics.
Okay, I'll pull it up here. Give me a second. Oh man, this is just the most ghetto thing. All right, here we go. Okay, here it comes. 3, 2, 1.
Like a bullet from a gun, she arrived on the scene. A young detective who doesn't know the meaning of fear. When she's hot on the case, no time to waste when you're face to face with an evil that is lurking, but you just can't see it. Persist, persevere, and the problem will disappear. You say you in a jam and you don't know what to do. Get down with the Drew Crew. Creeping in around, seeking and leaking over the horizon. Who could it be? N to the A to the N, C, Y. Doesn't battle with her fist, but with her mind on time. When she's solving a mystery. Bad boys and girls, your history locked up. Where your choices are few. A resident of a room without a view. Do the crime and it's time you will do. Another victim of the Drew Crew.
So how good is
First
that?
rap I ever
That's so
memorized
cool.
as a child.
Are you serious? Oh my
Serious.
God. I'm gonna have to send this podcast to my friend Fernando. I haven't talked to him for a while. It's really awesome. Okay, so my honest opinion of like listening to that is just it's really fun, and that actually is Marco's wife singing on there. Her name's Jill.
Okay.
So we got that in. We at least got it in there. Maybe not the main title, but that's her singing on top of probably a little bit of samples of a choir. And yeah, definitely Fernando's. Those are Fernando's lyrics. Period. Absolutely, 100%. He's so creative. He's so creative.
That's amazing. On the subject of live recordings, I know something that a lot of listeners want to know is kind of how it worked for you and how it does continue to work for you working with live musicians and what it's like to record with them and then to get them to learn their pieces. Because like you said, there's a lot of live music that's in these soundtracks, and I think that's one of the key aspects that makes these soundtracks so memorable. So could you talk about kind of how that all worked and how you still use them in your current recordings?
Sure. Okay, so 3 different ways that live recording worked on Her Interactive music. One was I had musicians come over to the studio and we would record I would give feedback back and forth. For example, I had Eric Rigler, who was actually the bagpipe player and did all of the various Ilian pipes and all the various Celtic bagpipey kind of stuff for the movie Braveheart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he did all that on the whichever one was the one that had all that kind of styled. I can't remember which one it was. So I had that. I had a guy that I used a lot was Matthew Montgomery, and he actually lived, I think, up in San Francisco at the time. And so he played all kinds of instruments. He played guitar, accordion, double bass, violin. Yeah, that was about it. I think he played a few other things, but that was really cool because I got him to do some accordion. And so I would really take advantage of the fact that he could play all these different instruments. So I would send him parts and really detailed descriptions of like what I want for each piece. And then he would send me all his individual takes, and they would all start like maybe at bar 1 or whatever. And I would just drop all those session files or just wave files into my sequencer. And then I would just record, I would just mix his music in with my music.
Wow.
So that's like the second way, so that's either people come to my studio and we record together, or I send files to a musician and then they record in their studio on their own time. And I usually send them, I would send them the music, like one, I call them stems. So like, imagine the piece of music, you'd hear everything except for the piece, except for the lines that they would be playing. So if I wanted live violin, I would send them the track minus the live violin. And then I would send a separate track of just the violin, like my fake violin from my samples, so that they can hear that. But then also once they've played their piece in with their live violin, they can just mute the fake violin so they can see how it sits in the mix. So I do that. And the third one is the kind of interesting, is when I decide that I think that I'm good enough to record my own stuff. And generally I'm kind of, I'm a piano player. I do a little bit of trumpet and a little bit of guitar and bass. And then like all this other stuff, I just sort of have a lot of instruments and I just experiment. And a lot of it is when something's like the Venice one, Venice, like I did a lot of really experimental things with myself. And some of it was like just messing around with like a 1983 analog synthesizer that I had, one of my first synthesizers I bought, and just doing my own accordion kind of things, or just a lot. Some of the ones that have more of an island feel, like the Hawaiian one. I did my own panpipes and ethnic flutes, and there was a lot of, I would just, even like my own violin, and my little daughter at the time, Keller, I think she did some little violin stuff here and there.
Oh, cool.
So just kind of, just a little bit of like, you just have to have an open mind. So when you get that music brief and you start thinking it through, you're like, okay, what makes sense here? Like, could I do this whole thing myself? Do I want to reach out to a specific musician? Do I want to find someone new? Do I want to do a combo of all those things? So that's, and then, really that credit piece, like the fact that I didn't even know that it never made it in I couldn't remember if it did or not, but it's so cool that it got embedded and like someone found it, like, they were open. I don't know if it was my idea to do the rap or if it was theirs, but how cool that it's like there, and like, it's like this little Easter egg that
totally
you guys found, and it's fun. It's
so fun.
Fun. Yeah. And so it's just like, sometimes you just let the music tell you what it needs. And sometimes it's a combo of that plus the creators coming up with a really great inspiring credit or inspiring list for me to bounce off, my ideas off of. Yeah. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. So you worked with live musicians. In the credits of several games, it lists under the music or composers, you, and sometimes there will be other names as well. And one name that comes to mind, I hope I don't butcher his name, is John Deborde, if that's his last name.
John Deborde.
Deborde. There we go. So how with working with him, was he a composer or was he just a musician?
Yeah, so that was something that was really fun for me as well, was to sort of, I always did most of the heavy lifting on these, but there was always a couple tracks that I would like to, not always, but many of them, I brought in other composers to work with me that worked under me and with me on the episodes. And I found it very collaborative, and also just it allowed sort of the sound to expand a little bit more. And also, when I was just really busy with certain other things, it also helped to, just to have these resources of people that were sort of in my circle that could help. Inevitably, it was like a lot of times too, it was sometimes I would have assistants that were kind of new and kind of right out of school. And it was a great way to sort of help them sort of develop their composing abilities. And I'd put them through the ringer a little bit, like, here, let's try a piece on this and, give me your version 1. And then we could talk through as like a real world experience for them to be able to kind of do that. Like, for example, that was like Jimmy Schaefer. I remember doing that, and Mike Patty too. And Mike Patty now owns a very successful sampling company called Cinesamples. And he lives just up the street from me now. And
cool.
Really good friends and super successful. And also Jimmy Schaefer, he's an amazing composer. He's scores. It's a CW show. I can't remember the name, but yeah, like he's just extremely successful film composer and TV composer. And so it's just really fun to just do that with these guys over the years.
And so, yeah, we were just talking about people you've worked with. You also mentioned earlier that you worked with your daughter Keller early on, and then did she come back to work with you on Alibi and Ashes?
So Keller looks like it was on 25 Alibi and Ashes that she helped me on. And I kind of forgot a little bit about that. I was trying to think like how we did that. I bet it was just like I had her in the studio. We kind of worked on themes together. Keller, she plays violin and she's a singer now mostly, but she would come up with little ideas on her violin and was very creative and would come up with cool little ideas. So I bet what happened is she had some little ideas, and then I would take that idea and kind of, further tweak it and kind of manipulate it and make it, just arrange it. I should say it's better than manipulate. I would arrange I would arrange and make it work for what we needed it to be for that game. So yeah, that's and then my daughter Piper, who's older than Keller, she actually contributed a very significant variation of the Van Cleist theme for the TV show Generator Rex that I scored. And she was like 12, and I played her my Van Cleist theme. And then she's just sitting at the piano, and she came up with 2 different variations. And then I ended up using those variations like all the time in the TV show. And then more recently, when she was in high school and actually college, when she'd come home for the summer, we'd kind of just have her come in the studio. I'd almost have to like twist her arm a little bit. Hey, come on, I'll pay you. And so we'd kind of write music together a little bit for various things. But yeah, then she gets on the cue sheet, and she gets like these checks in the mail, and she's like, "Oh, Dad, thanks for having me help you on that thing."
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I know. So back on, I'm going to use a specific date here. On October 27th, 2011, Her Interactive posted an interview that they did with you and your daughter, Keller.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the making of specifically the song Tension from Alibi and Ashes.
Oh, okay.
And it's a great little interview here. I'm going to link it down in the description. But specifically for one question here, Her Interactive says, how did Keller contribute to the making of Tension? And Keller's got a great little response here. So she said, I wrote a little piece on the piano, and then my dad based tension on my piece. I asked my dad if he could use the song on one of his projects, and he said yes, and thought the Nancy Drew game would be perfect. In my dad's studio, he sat in front of the computer, and I stood on the side and watched how he did everything. The first part of the piece was my music played in... Oh, I feel really bad because I'm not really big on pronouncing music terms. Pizzicato?
Pizzicato.
Okay, brilliant. Pizzicato strings. Then my dad made lots of variations and added other things to it. I stayed and listened and gave my opinion on the piece as he worked on it. And so there's just a bunch of great little bits of information.
Yeah, that brings it back. I remember now doing that little interview PR thing for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yeah, of course.
It's literally been like 10 years. So that was,
it has been, yeah.
Yeah, I'm listening to it right now. That's
Yeah,
cool.
that's
You know, it's just kind of fun to reflect on. Just even when you, I mean, even if I took one of you guys and just had you sit next to the piano and just, you just kind of open your mind up and just say, instead of saying, I'm not a composer, I can't do this. If you just, just relax a little bit. It's like, we all can do art, right? We may not be the most amazing artists, but, give someone a pencil and say, well, just do something that feels really comfortable. And like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about if it's good or bad. Just try it, And that's what's just really kind of cool about a child is that they don't have all those pretenses. They just really let go. And I've noticed with all three of my kids, the most creative time is around 8 to 12 when they're really receptive and open to writing music and sort of being creative with music. And then it's almost like when they hit a certain age, they get a little self-conscious and it's like, and I think we all can sort of take an adage from that and just be like, no matter what it is in life, we don't have to hold so tightly to things. It's like, you don't have to be Picasso in order to go and buy some paints and a canvas and draw something cool,
totally.
Just have fun. Like the arts are for everyone, not just, like go get your GarageBand and make some beats.
Yeah, well, that seriously, I mean, I can attest to that. I'm not a great musician by any means, but I've made enough music on GarageBand to put it up on the internet and feel good about it.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
Yeah.
Was there ever a instance where you were like really proud of a track and you presented it to Her Interactive and they were like, absolutely not?
I can't recall a specific event, but I would say in general, like us composers, when we're kind of talking to each other, we always, there's one adage where like, whenever you do something kind of new or different and you're really excited about it, that means you'll probably get notes.
Gotcha.
And then it's happened to me like on like Marvel's Spider-Man and like Ben 10. Like I'll just do something really cool. I'm like so proud of it. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then I'll be like, I don't get very many notes back, but then every once in a while I'd get like a note back like on the cool thing I thought was awesome. Like, oh
Man.
But I mean that goes to saying that my job is to please the the people that hire me and to ultimately produce the creative vision that they want. So even though it's a little frustrating, I always have my version 1, so I can always keep that and then I have to go and just do a version 2. So it's not terrible. I'm looking through like on, some of these, like on Ashes and Alibi and Ashes, like there was on the Town piece, I had to do a version 2, Social version 2, the News and Home a version 2 on both of those. And then Clues, I got up to version 3.
Wow.
Do you have a track that had like more versions than any other track?
Well, yeah, I would say like, I'm looking here like, wow, version 3, that's pretty unusual.
So based on that, like there were very few times where you would have to go and make modifications to a song.
I would say in general, every one, there'd be probably 1 or 2, at least 1 to 3 that you would expect to just do some changes on. Sometimes they're minor. And it's so funny. It's just really depended. But I would say, I think there might have been 1 or 2 games where I didn't get any feedback, or it was like, okay, that's great. But,
wow.
I mean, in general, I would say, at least a little bit like, oh, let's tweak this or let's tweak that. Every once in a while, I'd be like, oh, let's redo the whole thing, I think. But that's very rare.
Right.
So just, I think that one of the things I always do well, and I think why I've been successful as a composer is just that, my job is to take the adjectives and turn those into music. And, music is very subjective, but it's the translation of the ideas that the producers have and turning that into what they want to hear. And that's the challenge. It's not just writing a piece of music. It's writing the piece of the exact piece of music that the producer and the director and the creators want.
Could you sort of walk us through the process of what it was like to create a soundtrack, or even just a specific song, from the moment you're given the creative brief to the moment you deliver the final, or quote unquote final product to Her Interactive?
Sure. Well, it definitely starts with getting the composer brief, and let's just a generic tension piece, right? Let's say it's the Alibi and Ashes, which let's say the Shadows at Water's Edge, because that's got the Japanese elements. So
perfect.
Like, okay, I'm given a little bit of creative direction. I kind of understand some of the instrumentation and whatnot. So then I have a conversation with them. They send me that first, and then I have a conversation. We would consider that like a spotting session, and we talk through everything, and they say what they're thinking, and I'm like, then I give my ideas, and we basically kind of come to sort of a rough consensus. Then I just kind of go from piece to piece. Usually I would just kind of go down score order from whatever 1 to 10 that they had, or whatnot. But let's say, so for the spooky one, depending on, it really depends piece by piece on kind of what they're wanting. You know, a lot of times I'll use piano as a starting out point just to come up with little motivic little ideas, or little melodies, or full-on melody. Piano is always a great place, and sometimes I'll write it out on sketch paper. Other times I'll just play it right into the computer, and then I take that and I orchestrate into a fuller, bigger orchestral or whatever style. It just depends. Some of the games just require more of an atmospheric, original, different kind of sounds kind of thing. So then I'll search for really interesting sounds for ambiances and whatnot. Or maybe I want to create some spooky atmospheres using like solo violin or other things. But generally when it's more melodic, or it's more tonal, where it's like these are actual pitches, I'll use the piano or like a string patch to kind of get the ideas started, and then I orchestrate from there. But if it's not really tonal and it's more atmospheric, then it's very specific to a sound. And so then that's where I go very specifically to my sound libraries and just start listening through and hunting for that, the it sound that's going to make that piece and it's going to start it. And then I really try not to torture myself, to be honest. I'm not a tortured artist, unlike some people are, some composers are, and some artists are. And I respect those tortured artists and I feel for them. But I like to keep things moving. So if let's say I'm doing an ambient piece and I really understand, I've had the conversation, I've read the material, and I find a sound that I really like. You know what? Boom, that's it. That's the sound I'm going for. I'm not going to sit and listen and pick 10 good sounds that I know that I like, and then, sit there and debate between the 10 of which one I should use. And I really like the element of chance and the element of just, keeping the ball rolling and just like get it going, find something that you like and move on. And then when things aren't working, then just to say, okay, it's okay, stop, pause, maybe mute that thing, keep it loaded, keep that sound there, but just take a step back and then start over again. So it's just a series of a lot of quick decisions, that result finally in the music being written.
Were there many creative challenges that came up while writing these soundtracks?
Just like I mentioned, the one that was the more period ones, I think were always challenging. Like when it had to sound very specific to being a Western, or, the 1930s or 1920s. So that would just require me digging a little bit deeper and, really investigating and learning about certain cultures and styles of music, and getting a good understanding of that before I just jumped into writing. So I think those were the biggest challenges. But again, that was kind of like going back to what I was saying. That was what I loved about writing music for the interactive titles, was that every one had its own unique challenge and its own unique voice, while still retaining that mysterious vibe that was Nancy Drew.
I know you said you have children. So did you play any of the games after they were finished?
Yeah, so my girls and we played a few of the games. Mostly they did. I don't know how far they got. I have this weird thing. It has nothing to do with her interactive games because I think they're really awesome. But I just had this weird thing. Is like it's really difficult for me to play games that I've written music for, and I don't think I've really ever played any game that I've written music for, and I don't know why. It's like I think like, okay, I'm going to do it, and then I go to do it, and then I just don't. For example, Star Trek Online and Neverwinter, which are some really big games that are still around that I write music for every year. And I just haven't done it. And like I did the Tron Evolution video game for PlayStation and Disney and Infinity. Actually, I played a little bit. I played that's the one I probably played the most, the Infinity 2 video game. I did all the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, cool.
Versions. And I really enjoyed writing the music on that. And so I did play part of that, a good portion of it. So I played it enough, but I feel bad about it. I honestly do. I like wish that I played more, and I wish that I got my girls to play more, but they did like it. It just never turned into like a good habit of all of us doing it together.
Well, that's totally fair. I know I hear stories from even actors who say, I could never watch a film with myself in it because I know all the behind the scenes. I know I could improve my performance if I just would have done one more thing or something, So I totally understand that.
I feel like I would just sit and listen to the music, and it would really bug me. Like I would just sit and listen to it over and over and loop. And the same kind of thing happens when I listen to I do a lot of animation. So I have watched a lot more. Obviously, the cool thing about when you write music for animation is you actually get to watch the episode while you're doing it. So if I'm working on like a Ben 10 episode, and I start on a Monday and I finish on a Friday, and it's like an 11-minute episode. Obviously, I've watched the show a ton of times, so I know the story, I know the characters, and I know how the music interacts because I'm watching it over and over and over and over. And so there's something really nice about that because I feel like I kind of feel like I become friends with the characters, and I get to know them, and it's like I'm kind of in their world, because I really feel like music is like the silent character. It's actually not a silent character. It's an invisible audible character, in
totally.
Cinema and video games. But what's sad is like I don't get to. When I write music for video games, I maybe get a little bit of gameplay, or I get a document, or I get some screenshots, but I don't get to be in the game in an immersive kind of way like you guys get to when you play the game. So in some ways, you guys really get to reap the benefits from all of not just me, but all the, the creators' work. And that's the way it should be. And that's what entertainment is. And it's just kind of this weird curse for people who do work on the projects. For example, let's say, anything like a horror movie that's really scary. It's like, how can the director feel the terror of how you as the viewer would feel watching it for the first time? Or something that's really emotional and just really, gets you in the heart. How can you feel that over and over after sitting in the editing bay? And same with a video game when people have lived with a Call of Duty for 2 years. It's like or a Nancy Drew game. Yeah, me as the creator, I think I really do enjoy going back and listening to the music I've written. I think it's really fun to do, and I've really enjoyed today going back and listening. And there's a lot of joy in that, and I think that's where I can do that. I think like. For what's challenging for me as a composer to play a game to try to listen to my music is that games are really long. So, I might have to spend 8 to 10 hours or longer just to hear how the music is implemented in the game. But if I want to know how my music works in a Ben 10 episode, I only have to listen for 11 minutes for one episode. It's easy. It's very accessible. So I think that's always been the challenge.
Yeah, again, I totally understand that side of things. And, as a YouTuber, so there's I'd say about 90% of my videos I just can't rewatch because I just feel this
Yeah.
like, oh God,
Right.
I can't believe I said that, or I
Yeah.
made that, it's just one of those things.
Yeah, I won't be listening to this podcast. I might, listen to the beginning or whatever, but I'll send it to my mom and she'll listen and she'll tell me she liked it. So
Oh, fantastic. And just kind of to wrap up our bit, was there like a main reason or two why you finished working with Her Interactive?
yeah, so that was kind of it was a big bummer of a kind of an end. It was basically, I think I was talking to them about number 26 and I just got a call and it was the CEO. I can't remember his name, and then Megan on the line, but I think the CEO at the time was really pushing it. And what they told me was basically that they didn't want to co-own the music because I co-own all the music that I wrote 50-50.
Okay.
And they wanted to own the music outright. And then I think they also wanted to not pay as much as they were paying.
Mm.
That was what they said. But knowing what I know now too, I'm sure that, it's always a painful thing when there's a creative breakup, but I don't think it was anything like what I did. It was more along the lines of, at the same time that they were getting a new voice actor for Nancy, and there was kind of some shifts going on in the company. I think they were just trying to change things up so that they would stay sort of, I don't know, relevant or not relevant, but just, kind of, Her Interactive 2.0 or something.
Right.
I don't really know what happened, but I was like in the call, I was like, well, I'm willing to negotiate with, like we can come up with creative ways to make your budget work. Like we could reuse some existing. The other thing is that I had like a royalty every time they used the main theme for each. They reused the main melody for every single game.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I would get like a reuse payment basically.
Yeah.
I had a decent contract that protected myself as an artist. So there was probably just certain things that when they just looked at it from a financial standpoint, they're like, oh, well, we can save, blankety blank money and we can do it this way and whatever. So I think that's what happened. And it was like they kind of, when I got the call, they had already made up their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't had many calls like that in my career. So it was a definite bummer, especially once you've done 25 titles and like this thing just kind of falls apart and you had no idea I had no idea there was even an issue or a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what happened. So then I think after that, that CEO left and then Megan eventually moved on, and I have no idea what's going on now, but I mean, I'd love to score new stuff, but I know that they have some, other composers and that the music is good and that everything's that, and things don't last forever, and that's okay. Like
Totally.
I've scored 2 different Spider-Man series, that doesn't mean I'm going to write Spider-Man for the rest of my life.
Right.
Other people get to write Spider-Man, and I got to write music on the 4th reiteration of Ben 10. Well, there was a different composer on 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I've written music for Star Trek, and so has a ton of other people. I've written music for Dungeons and Dragons. So have a million other people. I've written music for Marvel, all that. So it's like there's times that we are part of things and then we move on to other things. So I just think that, it could have been handled a little bit better, but, those things are always awkward and hard, and, I'm fine with it. So, but I have good memories of all the work that I've done on the show and very proud of, everything that I've done.
Well, that's great. That's really great. And, if it makes you feel any better, I was in talks with the guy who started composing the games after you earlier this year, and he said that when he got the contract to start working with them, he was very excited, but at the same time he felt this fear of the legacy that you've built. He's like, I've got to live up to that now.
Yeah.
And
well, that's cool. Yeah, I think we're friends on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, he's a really great guy. But yeah. Well, that's really awesome. And so you mentioned it briefly, but if you were given the chance, would you work with Her Interactive again?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I know that the community would bring you back with loving arms, without question.
Maybe people can rally.
That would be incredible.
I don't know who's there now, and it's probably a lot of new people. So if they're nostalgic and they like the music I've done, I'd love to work with Her Interactive again.
Yeah, the company's very different now compared to what it was even like 5, 6, 7 years ago. So
yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, different in a not so great way, but either way, they're not dead yet.
Yeah.
But yeah,
the challenging landscape for sure.
Totally.
I have a question that I had earlier, but I forgot what I was going to say, and I spent the last 20 minutes trying to remember what it was. But so we know that at least during the time you were doing composing for the Nancy Drew games, they released a game most of the time every 6 months.
Right.
But I know that the music generally comes in the latter half of the production. So how long did it take for you to, by the time you got the briefing to, having everything set in stone and moving on with the game?
I would say, if I wasn't super busy, like if they gave me a brief on a Monday, I could have it all turned around in a month easily, probably. Wow. 2 to 3 weeks. But I think they were always respectful with, giving us enough time to have time to think it through and, a due date. I don't ever remember them. They're like I told you, they were very on top of things. I really don't remember it ever being rushed. It was always very nice and cordial and great schedules and very doable schedules and not stressful.
Well, we are now on to, I think, my favorite part of the show, and that is listener questions. And we have a ton of listener questions, so whether or not we get through all of them, we'll find out. But to everyone that did send in listener questions, a huge shout out and thank you to you, because I think just the amount of questions you guys sent in alone proves how much this music means. So we're going to start at the very top here, and Christy Dahl was wondering what your favorite Nancy Drew soundtrack was that you worked on.
Okay, favorite episode? Well, I'm going to tell you a story instead of one that stands out as being sort of special and
perfect and
funny. A funny story, I should say. So I believe it was A Message in a Haunted Mansion. I don't know what came over me, but I decided that I wanted to try to write the entire score in one day.
Wow.
I would never dare say this, but it's been so many years.
Wow.
And so I just decided that I was just going to work really hard and bang out an entire Nancy Drew soundtrack in one day. And I did it. And
no way.
Okay, now get this. I'm looking at the pieces. It looked like I had to do maybe 2 fixes on the Entry and Hallways piece and the Danger piece. I had a version 2. So it pretty much was all accepted, and I just had to do 2 minor changes. And then you go to some of the later ones where I really spent a lot of time, and then I would get a lot more change requests.
Oh my word.
I was typically, if I was kind of in a groove, I would maybe write, in general, I'd write 2 or 3 pieces a day. That would be a good groove. And I'd spend maybe 3 days to a week on a whole game if I was writing everything myself. So,
holy cow.
Yeah. I mean, what's nice about writing for the game is like the pieces are short, so they're like a one minute. I find that a lot of my ideas generally wrap up, sort of a core idea around a minute. So it was kind of nice because you're like, okay, well, I don't have to start thinking about what am I going to do for the second and third minute. It kind of naturally wraps itself up. So it felt sort of natural to be able to do, get one thing down, plan out what the live stuff would be, and then go on to the second one, and then go on to the third one, and then, get all the 10 pieces done, and then figure out, get all the parts ready, send it off to the musicians, or have the musicians come over and record everything at the end, and then spend like another day mixing everything.
Holy cow, that's just incredible. I'm kind of like mind blown by that, because I'm going to add to that really quick. Yeah. Message in a Haunted Mansion was the game that put Her Interactive on the map.
Huh.
And that's just amazing. That's so cool to hear.
It's like the
Wow.
kid in your class in college that like crammed everything 2 hours before the exam and got the highest score.
That's exactly.
I still can remember the day, and like I was in my first house and sitting there, and I remember at the end of the day, I'm like, damn, yeah. I was so proud of myself, and I was like, I can't tell anyone. If I tell them, they're gonna think that they should pay me less, or or they'll think that I was cutting corners or whatever. It's like, who do you tell this to?
That's just amazing. And that was the game came out in 2000 and we're in 2021. You've kept that story for so many years. Holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, just to go off the back of that one, Argofump is wondering, is it hard writing a new Danger theme for over a dozen games in a row?
That's a good question. Well, I would say no, because first of all, if there's only 2 games a year, that's 2, and also that the Danger theme always has elements of whatever location and style and vibe that game is bringing to the table. So it's actually really fun. Mm-hmm. It's like you've got you just know it has to be mysterious, has to have the sense of danger, plus whatever game it is. So totally. To me, that sounds easy to me.
Now, CJ has a lot of questions here, and he's very interested to know about the games where existing music was combined with original music. For instance, Dvorak's The Water Goblin in The Phantom of Venice. You took that piece, the original piece, which is a beautiful piece, and then you sort of made your own interpretation of it while sticking to the same notes and same melody. So when it comes to writing a song like that, how does that work for like the creative portion, but then even for getting compensated for it?
Well, compensation wise, if I'm taking like a public domain piece, like a melody, and I'm reworking it into sort of my own, it would just be the same.
Okay.
And then as far as like if they're finding a piece of public domain music and they're putting it in their game, then that's just kind of like out of my realm. I'm not really involved in that.
Okay.
So I wouldn't really even know if that was done. But if I'm taking elements of a public domain melody and I'm putting it in with my music, then of course I know about it. So in the film and television world, that would be called, someone who does that would be a music supervisor.
Right.
And they're responsible for all like pre-existing music and how it interacts in the film or the game project. And so, there's a lot of games that have tons of pop music and whatnot. And so that a music supervisor kind of works on that. So I didn't really work as a music supervisor on any of the Her Interactive. So it wasn't really part of my job to source any pre-existing music for anything. I was just only working on original stuff.
Okay.
But yeah. What is the piece in Venn that had?
So the piece is called Goblin, and I'll play it here for you.
Is it the gondola? Did you say?
Goblin.
Oh, Goblin.
Oh, yeah. I'll play it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
This one here. So that's the piece Goblin. And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. So that actually has elements from an original,
Yeah, so it's in my opinion a like beautiful piece. It's about 20 minutes and it's called The Water Goblin.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So I did an arrangement of it then.
way back. That was, I think the game came out in 2007 or 8.
Right.
So
Yeah, 2000. I wrote it on 1/16/08.
oh wow.
There you go. You got the timestamp.
Wow, January 16th. Okay. So that's a great answer there. So I am also, or CJ's also curious. So the game Warnings at Waverly Academy. I have a question about that one personally, because in the credits for that one, it says that Somatone Interactive did the music and not you.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I was just looking at that. So that was part of, if you look at how the first soundtracks that they sell on their website, they have games 20 through 25. But if you look at that, it has the Warnings at Waverly Academy. So that was, for whatever reason, that was the first game that they didn't come to me and ask me to write a couple pieces. If I recall correctly, they told me it was gonna be mostly just source music, and they were sourcing that themselves. I think they hired some students to come in and they recorded some existing music, but they recorded it themselves, and
Right.
so they were able to use that as public domain. I don't know why it happened or how or what, but it was kind of just told to me after the fact. So I wasn't really involved with that game. That was the first game after Kevin Manthei regime was over.
Okay, yeah, because I remember I only found out about that earlier this year. I was looking through the credits and I just happened to notice. I was like,
the coup had happened.
Yeah.
it was a silent coup. I didn't even know it happened until I was calling to say, hey, what's happening with 26? And they're like, yeah.
Oh man.
So, or whatever.
Wow, yeah.
What was it? 27. What number was?
So Alibi and Ashes was 25, and that was the last game.
That's the last one I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, 26 was the next one, Tomb of the Lost Queen.
Right.
But yeah. Okay, well that's really interesting because I've always been curious, or ever since I found out about that, I've been wanting to ask you sort of about how that.
Yeah, what's
worked.
interesting is when I was putting together the music for Mysteries Volume 5, they had to send me the music, and I put it together because that's why I have it here, and I was just listening to it. I thought it sounded good. The cues that whoever wrote it, it sounded good.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, for years I obviously thought it was your music, and so I thought it just sort of slipped seamlessly in with your work. So I guess they did something right.
Yeah.
But CJ wants to say that as a classical musician, he genuinely thinks a lot of this music is really well written, which is great. But he's also wondering, are you proud of the soundtracks?
Of course.
Well, there you go. So Marion wants to know, or this is more of a comment than a question. She just wants to say, please let Kevin know how fantastic his music was for the Nancy Drew games and how much the music contributed to the overall experience. In fact, I can't imagine these games without it.
Yeah, thank you. And it's been really fun over the years just to get fan mail from people who played the games and just really loved it. And that's one of the things that I enjoy the most, is just hearing from fans and just hearing from people that just entertainment really touches a lot of people's lives. And, it's like when you hear that popular pop song and that was from high school or whatever, and you picture yourself back in that day, and maybe you had a dance with someone, or you were cruising around in a car and you heard that or whatever, it has a significance to you. It's, it's just me sitting in a room writing this music. But what's cool is how that translates in conjunction with the game. And then, you guys have your own experience with it, and you think back to, whatever, sitting on your kitchen table, you just imagine yourself back in that time when you were age whatever, doing whatever, and it's nostalgic,
Totally.
And I've heard from so many people that video game music especially is very nostalgic for listeners, because it really transports them, just like a certain smell, in the fall, or we go get our Starbucks and we're like, oh, it's Christmas, because we taste. But music and sound does the same thing. And I'm just very honored to be part of people's lives in kind of a small way. And that's kind of what I do. I always imagined when I was 15 to 20 years old, like thinking like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I wrote music and people liked it, and like millions of people could listen to my music and like it, and I mean, to some degree that's come true, and that's kind of humbling and also really kind of cool. So yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, well, if I may, I mean, I've been playing, so I'm 21 now. I turned 21 a couple months ago, and I've been playing these games since I was 4 years old. And so I have just, I've grown up, and it's sort of been embedded in my life. And I can totally, like, it's just nostalgia, and I love it all.
Crazy. Yeah, that's just so cool.
Yeah. So Professor Pepper, I think, has a great question as well. They would love to ask about the relationship with both video game and film scores. Is there one that you find inspiring in general, and your opinion of the use of unorthodox sounds in scores? For example, Foley sounds being manipulated or not in the composition.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of using non-traditional sounds. I mean, if you listen to my scores for Invader Zim, and I would say I do it a lot of Nancy Drew, just basically using non-traditional elements in a cinematic space. And what was the first part of the question?
Discuss the relationship with both video game and film scores. Yeah,
I mean, they're very similar, but the one thing that's different, and I alluded to that earlier, the one thing that's different about game music is you really got to make that loop count, and you aren't scoring specifically a very specific scene. You're scoring more of an area or a place or an emotion. So music for a game, because the player obviously is moving around and doing whatever that you can't manipulate, you don't know exactly what they're going to be doing. So you're hitting moments, and you're hitting areas, and what's great about video game music is that the picture, if I'm scoring a Ben 10 or a Spider-Man cartoon, there's a really great action sequence, but then all of a sudden, Spider-Man gets hit on the head and I've got to do a big hit. And then all of a sudden the action music stops. Well, if I liked that action music that I was writing and I was in a groove and I was like, ooh, I want to do this, and now I'm going to go do this. Well, suddenly I can't do that. I have to follow the picture. But when I'm writing a video game piece, if I'm writing something similar and it's an action piece, I can just continue with that action piece, and I can let the music tell me and help me dictate where it goes. And I can resolve the music the way I want to resolve it, as long as I'm hitting within that 1 minute period.
Right.
Whatever the length of the cue is. So that's sort of the difference. But the way I approach video games and animation and TV is that I always want it to be a really high-end cinematic experience. I'm never writing down. I'm always writing up and making it as cinematic as possible.
That's fantastic. That's a great little behind-the-scenes information there. And Little One Cave is wondering how you feel your work on the Nancy Drew series has evolved or had evolved over the course of the 25 games.
Oh, that's a great question. I just think I think that all artists grow and change and just are interested in different things. And I don't know if I'm as proud as episode 1 or, the first game as I am as 25. And I think that technology changed throughout those 12 years. And my studio changed. It got better and better and bigger. And, I had more sounds and more libraries and more things to choose from. But that's really doesn't matter. I mean, back when I was writing the first game, I also was writing additional music on big feature films like the Scream 2 movie and other films. And we did what we needed to do then. And then a lot of times we were able to supplement with live orchestra or musicians. And And technology always gets better, but that doesn't mean music always gets better. We know in this world of auto-tune these days and Pro Tools, where it's a lot easier to copy and paste your chorus than actually having the musician to play it again. And you listen to Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, and you're like, that's a masterpiece, and that was done in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And hard pressed to find musicians and modern pop acts that are doing anything near that freaking amazing and creative. So time doesn't equal better in my book, and it's about the inspiration and just whatever you bring to each title. So I'm just proud of all of it, and it's been just a fun experience to have worked on that. And like who gets to I'm reminded of the composer on The Simpsons who got to write music on The Simpsons for almost a lifetime, and and in fact his ending was very sad, and they just randomly asked him to step down, and they hired someone else to do music for The Simpsons. It was like Alf Clausen, and it's like, why? This guy is just like a giant among giants, and it's just one of those things where, like, just kind of like this, where things don't last forever, but like just to think, like, here was this amazing property that I got to be involved with, where it lasted, I think, like 13 years, right? And that's just so cool. And so, yeah, I've just enjoyed the process very much.
Nia has another comment. Just want to say that he's fantastic. Those first games have the best music, hands down.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next question comes from Chaz versus Jazz, who is a very musical person, and they are just wanting to know what your favorite genres are to write for, and if you have a favorite instrument to play / write for. And then just also a quick comment that your music for the series was so phenomenal and really shaped how they play and appreciate music today.
Awesome. Thank you. I think I really enjoy writing music that speaks to emotions, and also music that has like gravitas, or just like a something that's kind of intense. I really like writing for things that have something to say musically. I'd rather not just be kind of soft little pads in the background. I'd really like to have something really strong to say with the music, no matter what it is and whatever genre it is. I'm a piano player, but like, I don't love a lot of piano in my music, but that doesn't mean I don't start at the piano to really create those ideas. And, piano and strings are sort of some of my favorite instruments for starting my composition, but then it really depends on what it is I'm writing, where I go first. I've been creating my own samples and sounds, and like using I had a live cellist come over and recorded all these really interesting textures, and and then I also was taking super balls and moving them along onto my different drums and cymbals and creating all these really interesting textures. I really find a lot of inspiration from odd and interesting sort of organic sounds, but less traditional sounds. So I am really open to, non-traditional kind of sounds and electronics and whatnot to start the inspirational process.
Okay, the Red Wolf doesn't really have a question, more another comment. I just love your music so much. It truly brought the games to life. The Haunting of Castle Malloy is the one I hold most dear because I want to go to Ireland one day. I can't wait to hear this episode.
Yeah, that was the one, I think, where I used Eric Rigler, the Braveheart musician. Right,
okay. Catherine Harton would like to know if you played any of the Nancy Drew games, so we kind of covered that earlier.
Yeah.
Which soundtrack you're most proud of? We also kind of covered that. And would there be a soundtrack? I think this is a great question. Would there be a soundtrack that you would want to revisit and possibly rewrite or add more onto?
Not really. I mean, I feel like I like what we did with the music for Mysteries, because we were able to take the existing pieces of music and the stereo quality versions and then bridge them together in sort of a suite kind of format, and so that it's listenable. You know, if there was some little orchestra or something that wanted to play something and they wanted me to, there'd have to be a reason for me to want to go back and revisit, you know, because I'm busy on new things and doing new stuff. But no, I don't really think like, oh, I wish I would do this or that. There'd have to be a reason to revisit.
Yeah, for sure. So this next one's interesting. This one comes from Shekov Vladimir from Russia, and they're wondering about unused tracks. So I know we talked about the rap that was used in Secrets, or that wasn't used in Secrets Can Kill, but was in the game files. So for The White Wolf of Icicle Creek, there is a track called Olympic that's in the game files, but wasn't actually used in the game. Do you know much about that?
I'm looking at it right now. Let me look at those. What's it called?
It's called Olympic, and if you can't,
I did an Olympic. I had to do two versions. So one was a version 1, and here's version 2. Oh, they didn't use this?
No, they didn't.
Oh, it's like Russian. It's in the soundtrack, though, I believe.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. You know, who knows why they didn't use it? You'd have to ask the producer or whatever. Maybe they found something that could work instead of it, or maybe they just decided to go just sound effects only in those portions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the first piece of the Olympic chase cue on the Volume 4 music.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good. That's a good point, which is, as the composer, you know, I only have so much power, obviously, in the project. So I can't, just because I'm contracted to write 10 pieces of music, I can't force or expect that those 10 pieces will be used in the game, or I can't also dictate where they're going to be used. There's a lot of things that are out of my control. So you think about that, you have to sort of have some grace when you, and I've learned that as a composer, and also when you watch television, sometimes in TV and or television and movies, you go like, well, why is the actor doing that? Like if you've watched some of the, you know, Star Wars movies that aren't as good, and you're like, gosh, like you know, Ewan McGregor and like all these big stars, and they're like, what the heck is going on? Well, they were being directed by George Lucas, who's maybe not the most amazing director in the whole planet, but even though he's an amazing creator, and you know, it just goes to say that it's this whole process that creates something that's either good or not good, or kind of in the middle. You know, I may be given great direction or so direction, and I might write a really amazing piece of music, but then if they put it in the wrong spot in the game or in the TV show, or they don't mix it loud enough, it doesn't have the power.
Right.
and that's out of my control, so that's kind of a given. But I think we all, as listeners and purveyors of content, need to kind of keep that in the back of our mind, that maybe the cinematographer, maybe that shot looks really stupid because the director told him to do it that way. It's not his fault or her fault. It's just that's just part of the collaborative process that maybe went a little awry. So I have no idea why that wasn't in the game.
Okay. Well, hope that answers your question, Vladimir. Kat wants to know how your time was on Invader Zim.
Oh yeah, what a great project. So that was the first animated show I ever scored, and that was around the same time Her Interactive and Nancy Drew started, just before that.
Okay.
But I think I probably scored a couple. I scored Zim like 1999 through maybe 1999, 2000, and then kind of ended in 2001.
Okay. And
some of the Nancy Drew stuff was around that time as well, which is really interesting because the Nancy Drew stuff doesn't sound anything like Invader Zim.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's something I want to commend you on, is having written so many soundtracks. And obviously, you've got, as an artist, your own style. And I think there are, that kind of carries the soundtracks along. But each soundtrack is so different to the previous one or the next one.
Right.
And I think that's such an amazing achievement to have continued to do that over the course of, 13 years and 25 games.
Yeah, thank you. I think it helped too to have some of the additional music writers helping along the way. And then the musicians' input on each one, and then the fact that each one was such a unique departure from the previous. So all that combined. And then at the same time, there is still somehow this cohesive element and glue that brought it all together.
All right, and our final listener question comes from Shuggy Sketches, and they want to know if someone or a fan were to want to hire you or contract you for a song or two for our own indie games, what does that process look like?
That process looks like emailing me and just letting me know what you're working on, and I'm sure we could figure something out.
That sounds pretty easy to me. That's not bad. Okay. Well, that's incredible. That about wraps up this episode, and I really do want to just give a massive thanks to Kevin for being on the show. I don't really know if I've got words to express how much it means to have you on the show, and all the music you've done, how much all that means to myself and everyone that's listened to it. It's just absolutely incredible. So I really want to say just a massive thank you for all of that.
Yes, absolutely. Just a big thank you. I think to piggyback on what Hugh said, I think I can speak for the whole Nancy Drew fan community that your music has been such a constant for us in our childhoods and now even into adulthood. They really do mean something to us. It's not just music anymore, but it's something that we truly have an emotional connection to. So thank you so much for taking this time to answer our questions and just kind of give us a glimpse into the process of creating all of that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's very humbling to hear, and I'm honored, and it's really cool to be part of something that's a little bit bigger than you are. And I think that you guys are fans of the show, and you sort of see how it is bigger than you guys, and it's like this collective experience. And like I was saying too, it kind of goes back to it's like we have these, it brings us back to our childhood, and we have these memories wrapped into these really immersive experiences, and that's those are special memories.
Yeah, it all goes back to nostalgia, and for many of us who started playing the games either when it first started in 1998 or as recent as the latest game that came out 2 years ago, it doesn't really matter when you get started. Mm-hmm. The music's gonna affect you at some point, which is great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Kevin, where can we and all our listeners find you if you want to get in contact or listen to more of your music that you've done?
Yeah, so I'm on, I would say, if you want to connect with me on a day-to-day basis, Instagram is where I'm at, Kevin Manthei Music. And I'm really starting to upload a lot of content on YouTube, Kevin Manthei Music on YouTube. A lot of Invader Zim stuff. I've just been uploading a new show called Villainous that's up there. And then, Facebook, I'm on Kevin Manthei Music, which I kind of hate Facebook's algorithms, but let's see what else. Twitter. I really am enjoying Twitter lately, and I'm just at Kevin Manthei on Twitter. That's a great place. I feel like there's a lot of good fans on Twitter. So yeah, I really do like to hear from people, and I generally will reply to people if you want to send me a DM on any of those platforms or email me through my website, which is just kevinmanthei.com. And I'm happy to hear from people. And I'm willing to work with young developers and creators on things. And, it's fun to be talking to people like you guys who, grew up listening to this stuff, and now you're at an age where you're creating your own content or you're doing your own things, and you're looking back at these properties and you're really appreciating them for what they are. So I'm honored. Thank you.
Fantastic. And then the same goes for Eli and Victoria. Where can we find you guys on the internet?
I am on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram as VBudkey. So you can find me there. I had taken a hiatus from streaming just due to some health reasons, but next week I'll be able to resume that. And then EA is actually participating in a Nancy Drew event this weekend, so I'll let him talk about that.
Oh, yes. So this weekend, there's going to be a Nancy Drew Speedathon, which is a bunch of fans, people in the community coming together. We're going to be doing some speed runs of Nancy Drew games Saturday and Sunday, which is the 13th and 14th at, I think both days are starting at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And we're going to be raising money for direct relief. And yeah, it's going to be a good time. I'm going to be participating. There are a couple other people in the community.
Yeah. Well, I'll be actually a co-host on one of these streams on the Sunday evening. So yeah, just to reiterate, that is on November 13th and 14th at twitch.tv/ND Speedathon, I believe.
Yes.
And it's going to be just an all-day event both days. It's going to be awesome. And then going back to the original thing, Eli, where can we find you?
So right now, I am most active on my YouTube channel. And I also have Twitter, Twitch, and all of my usernames are the same. It's Yandema211, which is YNDEMA211.
Fantastic. And I am Nancy Drew Walkthroughs on YouTube and Instagram, and you can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/LegoFreak689. I'm also on Twitter at @the_HughMiller, and that's really about it. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys again for being here, all three of you. Thank you, the listener, for listening to this episode. If you really enjoyed the show, that's awesome. Please be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, be it YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or whatever it is. Subscribe so you know when our next episode drops. Our intro and outro song is called Nancy Drew by the wonderful artist called Mecca. Thank you all for listening. We really hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you have a good one. So, again, thank you, and we'll see you in the next episode.
And baby, you could be my Nancy Drew, but it ain't no mystery that I fancy you. And I could be the Shaggy to your Scooby-Doo. Me and you together, baby, we can't lose. My Nancy Drew.